and welcome back to my channel. Let's take a look at what's in store today.
So last week myself, along with some friends and clanmates, decided to attempt the Xekorendaag Gauntlet Inferno 3. So this gauntlet has been challenging for a lot of people. I've seen many saying that you can't complete this unless you've got a whale on your team. And we decided to give it a shot with our highest resonance player on team being 5,700. So we weren't relying on people that were super high reso or anything like that. Everyone was kind of like, I think 2k to 5.7 being the highest, as I mentioned. So we wanted to attempt this to see if it was actually possible to do it without whales, and as always going in with a good strategy and a good team setup. So each team has a necromancer, and you can see on my team we have two, and one of those necromancers was my buddy for the whole thing. So Cheryl, that is on my team, was basically my buddy for these raids. So we're going to see if we can actually complete the whole thing and what time we make on it as well. So first boss took us under 1 minute to complete, and we're heading now into Aeyntragga, who is the second boss. Now this one has some different attacks, so it'll be interesting to see if we can complete this in the same time or possibly even quicker with any luck as well. Now one thing that I did try and remember to do for each boss was change my combat stance. So you can see I basically have been changing it as we leave the raid, and then when we enter it, it actually refreshes the timer on that. So I'm going for my offensive stance, which actually increases my critical hit chance by 10%, but it gives you a 20% increase on critical hit chance for the first few seconds it is active. So that is why I've been changing that each time I leave and join the next fight. So this should help with my critical hit chance and my overall damage for the raids and the gauntlet. And hopefully will help us take these bosses down quicker. So you can see Aeyntragga is now dealt with. Super fast damage there from everyone. So just waiting for the portal, and we'll go into the next boss now. So the next boss we're facing is Uthmaash-Ksarr. Now this one can be quite tricky as there are a lot of attacks to avoid, and obviously the fog to avoid as well. So we'll be having to use the lanterns throughout this to ensure that we don't take too much damage. And they did also change some of the things with Uthmaash-Ksarr. So recently the developers have changed a couple of bits. So there's less immunity with this boss now, and a couple of the attacks don't hit as hard, because what people were saying was that even in normal Xekorendaag raids, this boss, a couple of the attacks were basically one-shotting people, which shouldn't have been happening. It was way too powerful. And this boss is one that some people were finding more difficult in Xekorendaag raids than the last boss. So that's been amended. So it was my first attempt trying this gauntlet with those changes in place. I did attempt Gauntlet a couple of times previously, but it was kind of a rushed setup and I hadn't really had time to work on a build for it or anything either. So this is after we've made the changes to builds, and everyone's pretty much come in with the right build for this. Everyone's come in with a lot of work put into the build that they're using, and it definitely has made a difference so far. As you can see, we're doing damage really quickly to all the bosses, and even Uthmaash-Ksarr is going down pretty quickly here. Now, I was really hoping to avoid this phase of this raid, and you can see already still doing damage on Uthmaash-Ksarr to the point that he is below 500k life now. But we have to deal with looking in the mist to find where he is, and of course it's always the last patch that you look in. But just like that, boss is destroyed and we can enter the next raid. Now those attacks were still hitting for some reason even though he was dead, so I decided to run out quite quickly, but because of that I didn't manage to change my combat stance until after I'd entered this raid. So this is Xekorendaag Ice Leviathan. Now my combat stance has a little bit of a cooldown on it now, so I'm going to have to wait for that critical hit chance. But for now, let's see how quickly we can take him down. Obviously, in Inferno 2 Gauntlet, he is still quite tricky. There's a lot of attacks that hit hard. There's the shadows, like shadow clones that it creates of you and teammates, which also hit really hard as well. And there's just quite a lot to avoid in this raid. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly we can take him down, if we can even take him down. Every gauntlet attempt that I've done so far, so before this, as I mentioned, we've had 2 other attempts, not with this team but with other players as well. In those attempts we managed to actually clear all 4 bosses, and it was just the last boss that we didn't manage to survive. So Let's see if we can do better with this one. Let's see if we can make a better time. And at the end of the video, when we've done all of the bosses, we will take a look at the leaderboard as well. So a few things to remember with Gauntlet and a few things to check on before you attempt it. Firstly, looking at your build. Have you got the correct build for this mode? Have you got something that's high DPS? And have you got the correct legendary gems equipped to make the most of the build that you're using? Next, it's team setup. Have you got the right team with you? So as I mentioned, it's not always about resonance. It's about having a good setup, a good build, and the right team around you. So with regards to team, you need to know your role within that team. Are you DPS? Are you a support role? That's super important to know for Halicri Gauntlet, and also making sure that the teams are balanced. So if you've got someone on the team that is support, are they on the correct team? Are the support players equally spread out among all the players on the team? So as I mentioned, Cheryl's with me as my support. So she is boosting me and also protecting me, or keeping my butt safe from these bosses. Now, another thing is strategy. So for this last boss, you can see we're kind of paying attention to the life on all of these legs and moving from one leg to another. So with this boss, you really need to take all 4 legs down at the same time, or within a few, literally milliseconds of each other. So that is why we were all working on those legs together and moving around quite a bit there. So strategy is super important, definitely for this last boss. I think the other bosses, we've all got enough experience with them now from Halicri raids to know exactly what to expect. But with this boss in Halicri raids, you can take him down really quickly without actually having to experience any of these phases that you will get in the Halicri Gauntlet 3. So Morsagurei is quite a hard boss in Gauntlet, and this is one that a lot of people struggle with the most. I definitely did struggle with this as well. So I'm going to let you watch and see what happens. Are we going to defend it? Are we going to defend it? No, I'm definitely not going to defend it. We want to destroy it. Are we going to destroy it this time? Is it going to be a successful gauntlet? Let's wait and see. So legs have been restored, and we need to do the exact same strategy that we've done just now. So we need to focus on all the legs at the same time. What we're doing is taking each leg down to about 50% before we are going to destroy all of them at once. The reason for this is some of the players have really high DPS, and they're going to be able to take those legs down a lot quicker than others. So we're making sure that we get each leg to, as I said, about 50% life. You can see each one has a health bar. I'm just going along here and checking which ones need work on. So this one you can see has a lot more health than the others, and trying not to actually attack the other legs by mistake. You can see we're also trying to avoid minions as well. So there's a few normal monsters that actually do quite a lot of damage in the Halicri raids. So it's important to try and avoid those attacks as well as the boss attacks. And obviously sticking with the strategy that you're going with for the raid. So let's talk about build and what I'm using here. Kicking off with set items, I'm using 4 pieces of Vitus. This increases the duration of all beneficial effects on you or your party members by 30% and increases the target's attack speed by 30% for 3 seconds each time you use a skill to grant a beneficial effect to yourself or to a party member. So I like Vitus in this build because a lot of my skills are actually buff skills. I'm using 4 pieces of Grace, so all continual damage, channel damage and persistent ground damage is increased by 15%, and each time you damage an individual enemy 5 times, you'll do 19,425 additional damage to that enemy. Now I'm going to skip information on the helm because the helm slot unfortunately is obsolete in this build, and there wasn't any skills that were really kind of strong enough to use. So straight on to chest, we're using Rampant and Inscrutable. Lightning Nova now conjures a lightning orb that orbits you, firing lightning bolts at your target while you use your primary attack. Lightning Nova damage increased by 18% and increased 10% there as well from the Awakened slot. Crystalline Shadow on the shoulder. Disintegrate now summons an arcane deputy that follows you and channels a disintegrate beam at enemies. Disintegrate damage is increased 18% and disintegrate damage increased 10% from the Awakened slot there as well. Novel Castigation on the pants, a solid favourite. Arcane Torrent also fires tracking missiles that seek out enemies, dealing 13,972 damage. Damage is increased by 90% and Arcane Torrent damage increased 10% from the Awakened slot. And Rift Carver with this on the main hand. Arcane Torrent now creates a Celtic Orb that moves with you and fires arcane missiles at random nearby enemies. Arcane Torrent damage increased 18% and Arcane Torrent damage increased by 10% from the Awakened slot again. Now moving on to the offhand, we're using Hailstone. So Ice Armor now protects you with 6 charges of damage immunity that also chills nearby enemies when they attack you. Ice Armor cooldown is reduced by 7.2% and cooldown decreased 10% from the Awakened slot as well, with 4 pieces of Lashed equipped too. Radiant Splines on the alternate main hand. When Lightning Nova deals a critical hit, it emits a charged bolt that deals 12,561 damage. Cannot occur more often than once every 1 second. Damage is increased by 90%, and Lightning Nova damage increased 10% from the awakened slot. And Blaster Cast on the main hand. Magic Missile fires 2 additional missiles, each dealing 5,247 damage. Damage is increased 90%, and damage increased 10% again from the awakened slot. Now, a couple of other things to mention that I'm using within this build is the Warband buff attacker. This is increasing my critical hit chance from the remnants that we've found as a warband. And I'm also using the Slinger Paragon tree. Now, most people would recommend going in with Survivor. I definitely recommend that if you're not going in as a DPS for the team, definitely go in with Survivor. However, I've got the Unseen Dynamism skills equipped from that Paragon tree, from the Slinger tree. So this is making my primary and skill damage stack. And that's why I like to use that for the Halikri gauntlets and raids as well. Now, something else to mention around the gear that I'm using is that I have got several pieces of Eternal gear equipped, and this is to make the build even stronger. So you can see I have one active on Disintegrate, which is giving that additional beam. I've also got 2 pieces active on Lightning Nova, so this is increasing my attack speed by 8% for 3 seconds. And then I've also got 2 pieces active on Ice Armor, so this will increase my movement speed, making it a little bit easier for me to move around at a faster pace, as I obviously don't have any other movement skills equipped. Now, for legendary gems, I'm using my normal setup. So we've got Blood-Soaked Jade, Starfire Shard, Roiling Consequence, Pain Clasp, Seeping Bile, Bottled Hope, Wolfhjort, and Mother's Lament as well. Now, Mother's Lament and also Roiling Consequence are again increasing my critical hit chance. So I have quite a few things increasing critical hit chance within this build. Now, I've just died for the second time in this raid, so I managed to survive the first 4 bosses. And Morsagurei has taken me down twice so far. So I did type in the chat to let my team know how many self-res I have left. Because this is a good way of everyone to keep track, because obviously if someone has none left, we need to be able to revive them if possible. And also it might mean that we need to make sure that we're positioning ourselves closer to the necromancers on our team to ensure we're getting that bone armor. You probably noticed that I also died for a 3rd time there, so I now have only 2 self-revives left. However, I do have 5 team revives. Now, that might not seem too bad. However, this enemy is about to enrage. As you can see, we are seconds away from this. And once an enemy is enraged, when they're already throwing a shitload of attacks at you, it is going to be even harder to revive your teammates unless you've got loads and loads of armor on. So that's the reason why I came into this with ice armor, even though I knew that I would have that bone armor from the necromancer on my team. I just wanted to make sure that I would have double layers of armor, because I knew that this was going to get pretty hard at this point in the raid. And we have some team members that are also down without any revives left. So Game Zone's down and Jack Harris is down, and they were working together. Jack Harris was Game Zone's bone armor, and Game Zone has no self revives left. And as you can see, we're not really in the position to be reviving anyone at this moment in time. So we're pretty close to actually taking Morsagurei down. Or Morsagurei, sorry, I said it completely differently, like 4 times, because this was intense. And I can't believe how much damage we're doing, considering we have the boss enraged right now. And all I was focusing on at this point, because I knew Game Zone was down, because I knew Jack Harris was down, and I was like, 2 of our strongest team members are down, I was like, I literally just need to spam my attacks as much as possible. I was not even looking at the boss at this point. I was literally just looking at all my skills and waiting for them to refresh so that I could hit them as quick as possible. And you can see we are literally about to do it. Morsagurei is going down. We've hit a new Paragon level, Paragon 514, and we got the first clear rewards for Gauntlet Inferno 3. Now, I was 3rd for damage, which I was actually really happy about that, considering how many times I died, and considering that Wizard isn't really classed as a DPS class whatsoever. Quite often, Wizard isn't seen as a class that can help boost and carry in these gauntlets. And yeah, amazing result there. And what was even more amazing was this. We made it to the leaderboard and we ranked 1st. So I was super happy with that result. Honestly, that is insane. First time I've ever ranked 1st for Gauntlet, and I'm super happy with that. So that is it from me today. I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it helpful. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.